Don't know anything about some kind of a weather balloon or UFO that's out in the vicinity of Fort Sumner tonight, do you? Looks like it's 300 to 400 foot long, cylindrical, some kind of a strobe on it and everything else.
Unidentified flying objects are not always seen from the ground. Increasingly, pilots are reporting sightings from the air, and they're prepared to talk about them.
It was not an airplane, it was an object, an unknown flying object.
We had someone call here earlier about a pilot, an unidentified flying object.
Yep, that's us.
It's tracking about 390 knots. We've been tracking it for about 3-4 minutes now.
This kind of things is flying. For us, still being unknown traffic, and a lot of controllers in the world, they know about it.
What is it that pilots and air traffic controllers are seeing? In Russia, a military commission that investigated the UFO phenomenon for over 20 years has arrived at an extraordinary conclusion.
The final conclusion of this high-level commission was a recognition that there probably was an alien civilization present.
I had a couple of aircraft reported something 300 to 400 foot long, cylindrical in shape with a strobe flashing off to the end of it.
Oh.
At 30,000 feet.
All over the world, highly trained pilots and air traffic controllers are observing strange objects in the skies. In the past, they've been reluctant to speak publicly about their experiences, but a growing number are now prepared to come forward. Captain Werner Utter was one of Germany's most distinguished commercial pilots. During his time as chief pilot with Lufthansa, he had 3 separate sightings of UFOs, and although he didn't report them at the time, he's prepared to talk about them now.
On one flight, we took off in Beirut. Destination was Damascus first, and when we have passed the Lebanon mountains, I saw a light just ahead of our airplane. Suddenly this light came very fast towards us. First I thought it was an airplane, and this big light, it was 2 meters in diameter, and it was pulsating. It was standing between the inside left engine and the cockpit. Suddenly, after 1 or 2 minutes, this light went up like a rocket and disappeared.
Some years later, Captain Utter had another UFO sighting. This time he reported it to air traffic control at Maastricht. This is the actual conversation.
Okay, fine, and for 61, about 4 miles ago, we passed an unknown object like a cigar. Do you have anything on the scope?
What was it like?
Looked like a cigar, about 3-4 meters. It was too fast.
No, we have nothing on the radar.
Okay, fine. It was about 100 meters below us, just passing.
Probably kind of UFO.
Maybe Himmelfahrtstag.
UFOs are being seen in the skies over different continents. In February 1995, an American pilot encountered a strange light while flying over Albuquerque. Like Werner Utter, he too reported it to air traffic control.
We were at 37,000 feet, 100 miles from Albuquerque at night, and the whole cockpit just lit up, kind of this bluish green. And I thought air traffic control had put another aircraft at our altitude by accident. It seemed so close. And it was going thousands of miles an hour. I've never seen anything that fast. And so air traffic control got on, and we said, "Do you see anything on your screen?" And she said no. And then she asked the other airliners in the area, and they said, "Yeah, we see it too." And one guy said, "Oh, it must be space debris." And right when he was saying that, this thing, a big pulse of white light came from behind it, and it just took off at a 45-degree angle back up. And I got on the radio and I said, "Well, when does space debris or meteorites go back up?" And at that time, there were 4 other airliners representing all the carriers, and nobody wanted to report it.
British pilot Graham Shepherd had 2 UFO sightings in 30 years of flying, but it wasn't lights in the sky that he saw.
I had a very clear view of this craft as it came towards us. It flew slightly below us, several hundred feet below us, and about a quarter of a mile away. And I had a very fine view in the sunlight, reflecting sun, of a hub-shaped craft. I would say about 30 feet across. It was quite distinct in its outline. There was a number of fair weather cumulus clouds around, giving very, very good depth perception, so that this was between us and the clouds that we were flying over. And once we got back to London, we discussed the whole sighting and came to the conclusion that we shouldn't report it because it would be detrimental to our career prospects.
Looked like a cigar, about 3-4 meters. It was too fast.
If pilots see something that is unusual and very strange, the chances are very high that it won't be reported. So my opinion is that there is a huge resource of experience and sightings that have never been reported.
In Mexico, there have been literally thousands of UFO sightings in the last 5 years. Although many may be tricks of the light or weather balloons, they're real enough to be causing concern to the pilots and air traffic controllers who see them on their radar screens.
We have the responsibility to inform other pilots flying in all this in our airspace about that unknown traffic, the condition of flight, what is the heading, any kind of information that could be important for the pilots. The point is that they are flying there. These kind of things exist because they are flying, the pilots has a visual contact with them, and sometimes a radar have registered about it.
These sort of sightings occur frequently, but as Mexican pilots and air traffic controllers admit, they're rarely spoken about in public or the subject of official reports.
In Mexico, there is no official record of these cases, although there have been pilots asking air traffic controllers for information when they've seen lights in the sky. But these sightings are not registered in official reports. That only happens when there has been an accident.
One incident that was officially reported happened in 1994. Mexicana Flight 180 was approaching Mexico City Airport when a UFO was momentarily seen on ground radar.
We detect two echoes close to this flight, but very momentary, just in a few moments, them disappear. But we receive phone calls 30 minutes before about that the people was watching something on top of the World Trade Center building. That building is located very close to the track of the final approach of runways 5 in Mexico. And in that precisely point, this object having a collision, apparently a collision with his landing gear. The people has visual contact in the building. That building is located in the track of the final approach of runways 5, and in that point, the aircraft has a collision.
That night, as Flight 180 made its final approach, Captain Raimundo Cervantes was at the controls. This is the official recording of his conversation with the control tower. Although the UFO had disappeared from radar screens, this object in the sky was still seen hovering over the city. Flight 180 landed safely, but the crew were unsure as to whether they had had a mid-air collision. It was certainly close.
We noticed something in the distance that looked like it was on a collision course with us, and this craft was coming towards us very fast. It really was a tense moment.
The next day, when the plane was inspected, there was indeed some damage to an undercarriage. This was recorded as metal fatigue, but Captain Cervantes disagreed.
I don't accept it. I saw it myself, and I know this wasn't metal fatigue.
The object was very big, silver-colored and shining.
That event was registered by the Mexican authorities, our supervisor, and in this center, and many people knows about it.
In South America, evidence from pilots and concern for air safety has prompted the Chilean Civil Aviation Authority to begin an official investigation into UFOs with the help of the country's Air Force.
Este comité fue creado en octubre del año pasado a raíz de las evidencias.
The committee was created last October because of the large amount of evidence that we have concerning anomalous phenomena.
Analizando todos aquellos fenómenos que no sean normales.
Since then, we have been analyzing any cases and reports that we get from technical staff, air traffic controllers and pilots. We also get information from local flying clubs, and especially from the Air Force and the Army.
Squadron Commander Danilo Catalan, a Top Gun who trained at America's elite fighter pilot school, has had 2 encounters with UFOs while serving in the Chilean Air Force.
We were flying in a training mission, an interception mission, 2 airplanes. All of a sudden, the radar ground control, called me, and they told me go to intercept an unknown traffic, maybe it's an civilian traffic, a commercial traffic flying in the military zone. We lock on the targets. All of a sudden we saw a strange form, like a tube, like a Habano, like a gray cigar, a flat gray cigar, and the dimension may be like a commercial airplane, like a 707, 747, like that. All of a sudden, this object goes to the right in a hard turn, like a brake, with a 90 degrees, and accelerate more or less to 5 Mach. 5 Mach is 5 times the speed of sound. On the ground control was the same picture, was the same. Was the first close encounter with a UFO report.
What are the UFOs that pilots and air traffic controllers are seeing?
564, can you pay that object at all on your radar?
Cactus 564, no I don't. Talking to 3 or 4 guys around here, no one knows what that is.
My certainty is that what I saw and what I have seen represents a technology which not only can fly in our planetary environment outside our normal aerodynamic envelopes, but by implication must be able to fly outside the planetary environment, well beyond our dreams and expectations.
It's right out of the X-Files. I mean, it's a definite UFO or something like that.
I don't know what could be, really not. I don't know. In case that belongs to the Earth, they are broken all the international rules, and that it's very dangerous because nobody knows nothing about that flights, you know.
It might be that it is something we don't know yet. Maybe as people say, from outside space. I don't know it, but it could be.
But could pilots and air traffic controllers be mistaken? Is there an answer to the UFO phenomenon much closer to home that may be the best kept secret of the century? The research and development of state-of-the-art military aircraft has always been carried out under the strictest veil of secrecy. The latest machines have decades of high-cost science and technology invested in them, and they've been in the skies for years before their existence is ever admitted. Such ultra-secret programs are known in defense circles as black projects. And in this world, at any given time, there are few individuals who know for sure the shape of things to come. In Washington, an organization that studies black projects is the Federation of American Scientists. John Pike is their leading expert.
Well, a black project is any project conducted where the fact of the existence of the project is supposed to be hidden from the public. The total black budget in the United States today is probably somewhere between $30 and $35 billion a year.
The end products of black projects invariably have a long lineage. The Northrop flying wing of the 1950s is a direct ancestor of today's stealth aircraft. High levels of secrecy make it impossible to know for certain what may have been in development at any given time. It's possible that there existed in the past exotic aircraft whose design and flight characteristics still remain a secret to this day. Are there any that might fit the description of the UFOs that pilots have been seeing over the years?
They didn't tell us about the U-2. They didn't tell us about the SR-71. They didn't tell us about a lot of aircraft even during World War II. At one time, the P-51 was secret. The Thunderbolt was secret when they were originally testing them. In other words, it wasn't widespread knowledge.
Jack Pickett is the retired editor of an Air Force magazine. He claims that while working at an airbase in the 1960s, he saw previously unknown aircraft that may well explain flying saucers.
We saw some aircraft parked at the end of a runway, and I turned to my partner and says, "Did you see what I just saw?" And he says, "I sure did." I says, "Those are flying saucers." He says, "That's what they look like to him."
Jack Pickett made from memory his own scale drawings of what he saw that day in 1967.
They were a disc-type aircraft, flying wing, circular. They had the pilot compartment dead center, and they had the tricycle landing gear, and there was no they were jets. Three of them had what looked like twin jets on them with the exhaust coming out of the bottom. I later got to walk right around them. And the big one looked like four jet intakes, two on each side of the main fuselage, and four exhausts out of the bottom. There was no mistaking them as anything except a flying saucer-shaped aircraft.
Pickett says he was given permission by the base commander to ask questions about the aircraft he had seen for an article in the magazine he was editing.
The very first question I asked him, I says, "Are these the flying saucers everybody's been hearing about?" He says, "Yes, they are." So I asked him, "Are these the aircraft that caused the Roswell publication stuff?" He says, "Yes, they are." I says, "All this stuff about aliens and things, they come from your aircraft?" He says, "Yes, we had accidents." So I asked him, well, obviously this type aircraft had to be for some specific use. I says, were they spy planes? He says, yes. Over Russia? He says, yes, but you cannot print that. And I don't know whether I should even say that over this film or not.
Apart from his own account, there are no official records to corroborate Jack Pickett's story of the American military's flying saucers in the 60s. But there is evidence in this recently declassified Air Force document that saucer-shaped aircraft were on the drawing boards of America's Air Technical Intelligence Center 10 years earlier in 1955. It was called Project Silverbug and contained plans for the development of a vertical takeoff saucer-shaped craft capable of flying at high altitudes and supersonic speeds using a radial flow engine. However, there's no evidence that Project Silverbug went ahead. But tracing a possible lineage for saucer-shaped craft back 10 years earlier, there is a craft that fits the bill. In 1946, Thomas Smith was an engineer working on classified aircraft that were being constructed for the American Navy.
They took me out into the hangar and they showed me this new jet aircraft, and I said, oh. And then I looked over to the left and I said, holy mackerel, what is that over there? And they said, well, since you're cleared for top secret, it's called a pancake. As a matter of fact, the material you've been testing is being used to build that. It looked like a disc, and the New Haven papers would report the fact that some round object was saw flying over New Haven. And of course we were laughing because those of us who worked on it knew what it was that they had seen.
It's certainly the case that in the 1960s and in the 1950s, the Central Intelligence Agency knew that many UFO reports were in fact sightings of its classified balloon and aircraft programs, and didn't do anything to dispel the public confusion. The public was seeing a lot of classified programs back in the 50s and 60s, looked like unidentified flying objects. The intelligence community knew that those were their own programs and just didn't tell anyone.
At a time when many UFOs were being mistaken for secret projects, the Air Force had already made a public statement that there were no secrets of their own that could be mistaken for UFOs.
We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
Rocket tests in New Mexico in the 1950s and 60s were frequently mistaken for flying saucers. It's not inconceivable that at the height of the Cold War, the American military found in the UFO phenomenon a ready-made cover story for the many secret activities that they were involved in. Today, the public is just as much in the dark about black projects. But there's no doubt that the technology is far more sophisticated and advanced than ever. Just how exotic the new propulsion systems and aircraft shapes of tomorrow may be is not known for sure. But informed commentators and aviation experts believe that a new generation, codenamed Aurora, is being constructed, and prototypes already flying.
During the late 1980s, I think the United States government was spending several $1 billion on very highly classified, high-altitude, high-speed aircraft, publicly called Aurora. Extremely secret program that to this day the U.S. government denies ever existed. But if you look at the number of reports of people seeing high-flying, fast airplanes, the amount of money that seems to have disappeared without a trace, and in the case of NASA's X-33, a lot of advanced technology that seems to have come from nowhere, I think there's a good case that Aurora was a real project. We spent a lot of money on it, and the government still denies it exists.
But a computer simulation is no proof that theory has become reality. Although there are reports of sightings of strange craft in this corner of the Nevada desert. Like the UFO phenomenon itself, the world of black projects is shrouded in mystery. One of its legendary bases, located here, is known variously as Groom Lake, Dreamland, and Area 51. For years, the American government denied any knowledge of it. The first picture to confirm its existence came from a Russian spy satellite in 1990. Despite formidable security around the base that is supposed not to exist, more pictures and some hint of the activities there are coming out.
Area 51 is the primary classified test facility for aircraft by the United States Air Force and the U.S. intelligence community. Traditionally, that's the location where new reconnaissance aircraft, such as the U-2 and the SR-71, new stealth aircraft, such as the F-117 fighter, have been tested. It's also the primary facility where aircraft acquired clandestinely from Russia or other countries are stored and tested for evaluation.
Reliable information on what goes on here is difficult to come by. Although some claim to have worked at Area 51, there is a suspicion that those who talk don't know, and those who know don't talk. But Edgar Fouché's credentials as an Air Force avionics specialist do qualify him with the exact sort of background to have been assigned to Area 51.
I was there to repair and do a couple of modifications. And I went up every day at 4:30 in the morning before sunlight, came back every night after dark, and did this for 10 days straight. The thing that bothered me the most about Groom was not somebody walking around with an M16 glaring at me when I was trying to work at times, but having to wear the goggles that looked like the black welder's goggles, that the sides are blocked off so you have no peripheral vision, and at about 30 feet everything becomes blurred, and at 50 feet if somebody was pointing a gun at me I wouldn't have seen them. So but anytime you're outside, or I was outside of my facility, I had to wear them because they didn't want me seeing anything, say in the next building over, or aircraft that were sitting on the flight line.
There are rumors that the Aurora Project is responsible for many UFO sightings in the vicinity of Area 51. Ball-shaped craft and strange hovering lights. There are those who believe that Aurora has produced a revolutionary breakthrough in advanced technology. Edgar Fouché thinks he knows what it is.
To me, the most fascinating vehicle from the Aurora program has been the TR-3B. It's a triangular-shaped vehicle that uses a circular accelerator, as you imagine a circle within a triangle, that rotates a mercury-based plasma at 60,000 revolutions per minute, pressurized at 250,000 atmospheres, and supercooled to 150 degrees Kelvin. I absolutely believe that all the triangular-shaped vehicles that have been spotted belong to the U.S. government. The only thing that could outmaneuver a TR-3B would be the things we copied it from, which would be alien vehicles.
Edgar Fouché can produce no proof that he has ever had any connection with Area 51. And the notion that Area 51 is in possession of recovered alien technology and reverse engineering it into exotic new propulsion systems and craft is widely held by those who believe in UFOs, as does Edgar Fouché. And there is no evidence that his TR-3B aircraft exists. Except that in recent years unidentified triangular craft with a pulsating light in the center have been seen in various locations around the world.
You have my word, whatever it's worth, that I trust my friends. I believe what I've seen, what they've seen and told me. And I believe this technology exists. I'm absolutely convinced.
Fact or fiction, Can black projects such as Aurora and its predecessors be the answer to what pilots and others have been seeing around the world over the past 50 years?
Back in 1967, I have absolutely no doubt that there was no military craft of that shape and that capability flying. Having said that, if there were to be such advanced technology, secret technology from the military, then not only would they have the advanced craft, they'd have the advanced control systems, radar control systems, and very well briefed pilots who would be invited not to fly in conflict with airliners, certainly not to fly on reciprocal courses in airways, but to confine their experimental flying to the areas such as the North Sea, maybe out in the Atlantic somewhere, or the deserts of America.
Maybe at that time was the SR-71, the American airplane, but they can fly about 3.3 Mach. And the radius of turn at that speed is about 20 miles. And this object was in a hard turn to the right and disappear. Was very impressive.
I don't think it's a secret weapon or something like that. It was not an airplane, it was an object, an unknown flying object.
It is a fact that in 1947 the American government believed that the UFO phenomenon was real and might be an advanced secret weapon of Soviet origin. It prompted an official but secret investigation. General Twining, head of Air Materiel Command, declared that the phenomenon was real and that unidentified objects the size of aircraft were being observed. What began as a classified project became a public study by the Air Force, known as Project Blue Book. Today, the American Air Force claims it's no longer interested in flying saucers. But there is a widely held suspicion that they may not be telling the whole truth. Another superpower has studied the UFO question at an official level and with military assistance. Unlike the American Air Force, they have come to some startling conclusions. In Russia, where secrecy once governed every aspect of life under the former Soviet regime, the UFO phenomenon was investigated over 20 years at the highest scientific and military level, their equivalent of America's Project Blue Book. Today, there's a surprising degree of openness about the subject. Official military reports on UFO incidents are freely available and keenly read in public libraries all over the country. This latest booklet, published in 1998, was compiled by military authorities. It records nearly 500 cases during a 12-month period, including one of the best recorded sightings of recent times. It happened over St. Petersburg in the winter of 1997, when a series of mysterious lights appeared in the sky over the city. Multiple witnesses, several different video recordings, and the involvement of air traffic controllers make this one of the most comprehensively documented UFO sightings ever. The St. Petersburg Incident was officially investigated by Captain Pavel Surchenko, a Russian naval officer.
The incident that we're interested in today took place on the 19th of February 1997 and was seen in a variety of different places in and around St. Petersburg. It began at 7 in the evening and went on until about 7:20. At 3 minutes past 7 they started to see the UFO at Poklova Airport. Air traffic controllers who were monitoring the runways saw it from the control tower where they were working that night.
On the 19th of February in 1997, I was a witness at the time to an unidentified flying object. That evening, I was working in the control tower and the incident took place right in front of my eyes. I began to make some notes about what was happening, the weather conditions, the time of the sighting, and the sequence of events. As I was watching it, I started to make some sketches. Little bright dots were flying up towards this group of orange-red lights from the left. And about 4 minutes later, the light seems to go away, but within another couple of minutes, the lights had reappeared. Now, the shape of the lights had changed, so I made a sketch of that as well. And gradually, these lights began to move about among themselves. Some of the others saw the UFO through their binoculars. I was able to keep track of the lights so that I could make some notes. Although I was directing air traffic at the time, I kept in touch with the people working beside me. One of the aircraft was out on the runway, so I asked them if they could see a UFO, and they confirmed that they could.
Reports began to come in from different locations at about the same time, confirming that unidentified flying objects were being seen, illuminated objects which appeared to be out of the ordinary. Several of the eyewitnesses managed to photograph this phenomenon and also to get video with amateur video cameras.
That night there were at least 3 separate video recordings of the UFO, taken from different positions in St. Petersburg.
Интересно, что такое? Егор, отойди от окна, зайка, отойди. Что такое? Поэтому ничего такого я сказать просто не могу.
I'm not an expert in this field, so I can't say anything officially. I was just an eyewitness, well, maybe better qualified than the man in the street, because I compared visual information, notes and readings from the radar. I can only say it was definitely some sort of unidentified object, extraterrestrial or some sort of secret tests. I have to say, I can't understand the need for secret tests over St. Petersburg. But to say that it was evidence of some extraterrestrial civilization, it would be interesting to say yes, but I really don't know enough to be able to make such a statement.
It was the mysterious and unexplained nature of UFO sightings that led the Soviet government to establish an official inquiry into the UFO phenomenon 20 years ago. It involved both the armed forces and the prestigious Moscow Academy of Sciences.
The reason that the Soviet Union began this project was the fact that a huge number of sightings and reports of strange phenomena were received by the Academy of Sciences. Most of the time we were unable to offer any convincing explanation. No one knew what it was that people were seeing.
A directive was issued to all units of the Soviet armed forces that any UFO incident should be the subject of an official report and sent to Moscow.
I worked from September 1977 to June 1989, and I used to get daily intelligence records in connection with any incidents that might have occurred. Throughout this period, I eventually discovered that the official number of reports amounted to some 7,700.
One of these cases occurred in the town of Tver, outside Moscow and close to a military base. The incident was caught on camera by 2 schoolboys. It was then reported to the military authorities, who launched an official investigation under Major Beloychik.
On the 4th of November in 1991, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a UFO appeared towards the right-hand side of the village. It first of all flew past the river Volga and then hovered around this sign. It made a turn and then banked several times until it changed direction and landed on the opposite side of the river. After that, it took off and flew away in the direction of the buildings. Two schoolboys took in the order of 11 photographs. I've studied those events and investigated them thoroughly. I took the negatives and sworn statements to Moscow for expert opinion. The result of all this was that the sighting ended up being confirmed as authentic.
There were two things in particular that attracted the attention of military specialists. When observing the behavior of the UFOs, the question of the extraordinary maneuverability of the flying objects always came up, irrespective of wherever the sighting took place. That is, they could alter their trajectory literally like an insect in flight. This was all highly significant. If our planes could move like that, not a single American fighter would be able to catch them.
During the Cold War, rocket tests undoubtedly accounted for some sightings reported by the public. But there were a number of cases that could never be explained, even by the military.
In the end, because we could not explain everything, we felt that the scientific research into these phenomena should be continued. The fact that there weren't many examples, maybe 5 or 10 cases that were inexplicable, didn't mean that they weren't important. In fact, they were probably much more important than those thousands of sightings which did have a rational explanation. In other words, it was felt that there was a great need for the research to be continued at a serious scientific level.
One scientist who assists the military in researching the UFO phenomenon is Yuri Semyakov, a professor of marine biology in Moscow. He has investigated several incidents of alleged UFO landings across the country, analyzing soil samples and vegetation to find out if there is any noticeable change in their properties.
We studied more than 12 landing sites in the vicinity of Moscow, and I also examined a number of sites from which samples were actually brought.
One incident which Semyakov studied in detail occurred at Podreshkovo near Moscow in 1979.
An extraordinary event took place here 10 years ago. We visited this site several times because of reports that a UFO landed. There was a train passing by, and 2 people saw this UFO, and they were astounded by what they saw. After that, we came here and studied the site. I personally supervised several biological experiments. I brought some insects here, ants, flies, and even worms, and studied how they reacted to the sight. That is, did they change their normal pattern of behavior? Something very interesting happened to the vegetation. It dried up. Now, of course, it has grown again and covered everything over. But at the time, the trees withered immediately and quickly turned yellow, and now all that is left are tree stumps. And further away over there, the trees are still dying.
After more than 10 years of scientific study, what conclusions can be drawn in answer to the UFO mystery?
This is an extremely difficult question to answer. I can't just say they were alien spacecraft, although such an explanation cannot be ruled out. It's possible, as many people think, that there are several different solutions to this entire phenomenon.
While scientists like Yuri Semyakov continue to collaborate with the military in the search for possible solutions to the UFO phenomenon, a surprising conclusion was reached by a separate investigation that the Russian armed forces carried out. One officer who was closely involved with this special investigation is General Vasily Alexeyev. Today he is in charge of space communications. General Alexeyev was ordered to review all reports on UFO incidents that had occurred at secret military bases in the Volga steppe region.
I can say one thing briefly and clearly. This investigation was carried out by our military forces with the assistance of the Academy of Sciences and the secret services. This took place at one of the secret bases in the Volga steppe, a location where the phenomenon itself was frequently seen.
It was proved conclusively and also reported that in the end there could be no question of secret weapon tests. They were not yet that far advanced, which leaves the question as to what all this could be. Despite the fact that there was a great deal of apprehension about using this phrase, the officials who were responsible for this high-level commission felt obliged to report that in the end there probably was an alien civilization present. The commission came to this conclusion, even though it was realized at the time that such an idea was a difficult one to put forward.
The fact is, this alleged report has never been reproduced publicly. There's no proof that it exists, and there is always the possibility that the Russians, like the Americans, are exploiting the UFO phenomenon to cover up some of their most closely guarded military secrets.
I give you my word as an officer that, with the exception of information relating to the location of military sites and intelligence which might have national security implications, I am discussing everything else associated with this phenomenon with a completely open heart.
UFOs are extraterrestrial in origin. Even if it were the final conclusion of the secret Volga investigation, is it an answer that a high-ranking general can seriously support?
Well, I think I've confirmed several times that I do actually support the notion that these objects appear to be of an extraterrestrial origin. I would also like to point out that if you take all the available evidence and the reported cases, then there's no other explanation that makes any sense.
Алло, слушаю вас.